Hi, welcome to Planetary Calendar's annual astrology forecast for the Chinese New Year. I'm Ralph Demetrius, one of the two astrologers for the calendar. Welcome to the year of the water tiger. Tiger years generally are kind of ferocious in a positive way. They tend to be very energized. If you've known anyone born in the year of the tiger, you know what I mean. And this is the water tiger, so it's a little bit more emotional, a little more lunar, you might say. The water in the Chinese system relates to the moon, so it's more emotional. But it also has a lot to do with accumulation. Water accumulates, so it means it's a good year prosperity-wise. And generally speaking, tiger years are good prosperity years. In fact, a lot of tigers tend to be very successful, but the water years especially so. So we're looking forward to a good year in terms of that. Now, when I did the annual forecast back, for January 1st, we do that because that's our calendar. But in truth, this is the real beginning of the year, the Chinese New Year. It's the new moon in Aquarius. This is when all of the energy draws back into the earth. And during that period of time, you can balance an egg on end because all the energy pulls in. I do it every year and I take a photo of it. I post it to social media and everyone goes, ooh, must be the Chinese New Year. Ralph is doing that thing again. But it has to do with the energy draws in, and it's when the seeds germinate. So this time at the Chinese New Year is the seed time for the entire year. Whatever flowers in the course of the year, whatever fruits come out in the course of the year are going to come out from this time. And the seed affects everything. So be very conscious of what's going on in the news and what's going on in your life at this time, and you will get a projection for the rest of the year. You can be your own astrologer. Just see what's going on at that time and project out. And you will get a very good sense of what's going on in the year. Now, it's location-based. Charts are not, the same for everyone wherever you are. I mean, if you live in Ohio and you live in California, your experience this year is going to be very different. Not just because one's by the ocean and one's in the middle of the country. It's because we are on different lines. Like, for instance, the actual Chinese New Year on the East Coast takes place on February 1st. The actual new moon is on February 1st. But in California, it takes place on January 31st. Why? Because the new moon is in the middle of the night. And it makes a big shift. In the United States generally, and in terms of the government generally, the sun, the moon, Saturn are all in Aquarius in the fourth house. There's going to be a great pulling back. People are going to really be grounding. It's going to be a tendency to say the rest of the world, oh, okay, we get that you're out there, but we really don't care about you. We're very focused on us. Everything's going to kind of come home this year. And if you live on the East Coast and, towards the East, focus on your home. Develop home projects. Develop a home business. Develop a second, if you have a job, get a second business going. Have other ways in which you can accumulate wealth in your home, or how can you improve your home in ways that are going to make it more appealing for you? Make positive changes in your home in the course of the year. The thing about Aquarius, it's all about positive changes. What's most interesting about this year is that Saturn is in Aquarius, and I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Now, if you're on the West Coast, it's different. On the West Coast, all this stuff happens in the fifth house, the house of joy, the house of the heart, the house of love, the house of romance, the house of creativity. So if you live on the West Coast or towards the West where this is happening, you really need to look at what gives you joy in your life this year, and you need to promote that. The concept of the wolves. Which wolf do you feed? Do you feed the brave wolf or the fearful wolf? Well, you got to feed the joyful wolf this year. You got to feed that. Whenever you feel like I need to have more joy in my life, what do I have to do to get that? Do that. Don't say, oh, I got to pull in and work on the house. No. I've got to make the house beautiful. I've got to make my life beautiful. I've got to make my life joyful, because on the West Coast, that's going to be the focus. Now, there is going to be a lot of focus in terms of consolidating our home, because there's a whole bunch of planets in the fourth house in Capricorn. Mars, Vesta, an asteroid, Venus, Mercury, and Pluto, Juno, all in the fourth house. So there is going to be a lot about consolidating. There's going to be a lot of focus on the West Coast about our forests. Capricorn are great trees, or the great trees are Capricorn. And there's a lot of focus and a lot of attention going into there. And I know that California is devoting a huge amount of money to managing the forests more effectively. And we live here, so we have been seeing this going on. That's going to be a big concentration. But it has to do with saying, we're doing this because we want to love this place. We're doing it as an expression of love. Now, let me get back to this thing about Saturn. Saturn is conjunct the sun and the moon at the Chinese New Year. It's Saturn in Aquarius. Okay, it's at 15 degrees. The sun and the moon conjunction is at 12 degrees. There's an asteroid actually at Australia, which is at 10 degrees, which relates a lot to legal issues. So if you are someone who loves following the courts and love legal cases, this is your year, especially in the media. You should be in hog heaven. It's just a wonderful year for that because it's going to be in the media all the time this year. At the same time, Jupiter is in Pisces. Jupiter has left Aquarius and gone into Pisces. These two positions are very, very powerful. And in this time of really recognizing the power of women, the importance of women in our society, this is especially true. You see, back when Uranus was discovered in the 1700s, they suddenly had another planet. They had never had another planet, and they had to decide, what do we do with this? And then Neptune was discovered in the 1800s, and Pluto was discovered in the 1930s, 40s. And suddenly astrologers said, oh, we should assign signs to these. And so they decided to assign the signs to these planets. And, if you've watched us a lot, you've heard me rant about this before. It's a favorite rant of mine. But basically what they did was they took Jupiter, and Jupiter is the planet of fun and joyfulness and athletic skill, and they decided it should be masculine. So they took Pisces, its feminine ruler, and assigned it to Neptune, a planet you can't see without a telescope. Okay. Then they took Saturn, the planet of structure and, concentration and seriousness, and decided, that should be feminine. And they took the masculine sign, Aquarius, and assigned it to Uranus, this new kid on the block, right? And then when Pluto showed up, they took the sign of feminine power, Mars in Scorpio. Mars is feminine sign, and assigned it to Pluto, an almost unknowable speck in the sky. Wait a second. This doesn't seem very fair. In fact, if anything, I think this was mostly guy astrologers who did this, because they kind of took all the feminine power that was implicit in the horoscope and distributed it to where it wanted to go. The thing is, they got it backwards, because if you truly understand how the dignities work, what's called the Chart of Dignities, if you look at the energy of the big planets, Saturn and Jupiter, right? Each has 6 dignities. It means 6 dignified roles, or specific roles they play. Well, the thing about it is that Saturn, of its 6, 4 are masculine, or you might say dynamic. Take Jupiter, 4 are feminine. So in truth, in the way that these planets play out in our lives, Jupiter plays out on the feminine side more than it plays out on the masculine side, and Saturn plays out more on the masculine side than on the feminine side. So when they gave away the signs, they gave away the most appropriate sign. Saturn in Aquarius is its most authentic external expression, and that's where we are now. Saturn in Aquarius. Jupiter in Pisces is the most authentic expression of Jupiter. Jupiter in Pisces means the oceans. What, the oceans can cover 3/4 of our planet? Right? Think of the oceans. Think of Jupiter in Pisces. One of the things we're going to see with Jupiter in Pisces this year is a lot of issues related to the ocean. In fact, at the Chinese New Year, there's a line from Jupiter that goes right over the Caribbean. So we've been projecting a very, very difficult hurricane season where, parts of Florida are definitely going to go underwater or spend a lot of time, wading through water. So just be prepared for that. Saturn comes up through the East Coast. In fact, the Saturn-Uranus Sun line comes up right through the East Coast, but it's the IC line, the line of drawing within. So you're going to find on the East Coast, people feel very, very compressed. The West Coast has much more positive lines, and it's Mars in Capricorn. This is why I said Mars, a lot of energy going into the trees. Thankfully, it's not Mars in a fire sign. Because other times when we've had Mars in a fire sign over the West Coast, it has been a horrible fire season. Horrible fire season. But this year it's in Capricorn, the sign of hard work. Mars in Capricorn is the exalted position. It's really an industrious position. It's conjunct Vesta and Venus. So it has to do with having a mission. Our mission of managing our forest. And Vesta and Venus dealing with the beauty and the natural resources of our Earth long term. It's Capricorn. Everything in Capricorn is long term. Mercury is also there, and Pluto later in the sign. So it's a very, very big concentration. So this dynamic between East Coast and West Coast, be very aware of that. Where do you live? Do you want to really focus on consolidation in your home? And also, if you live on the East Coast, be very careful in your communications. Be very careful in your local travel. It's all Capricorn this year. Where on the West Coast, it's much more about pursuing your joy, being creative, and then strengthening your foundations in a very, very positive way through hard work. I mean, if I was a much younger man, I would go into the logging business or something like that, because the need for this in our area, the good management of our forests is so important here. Now, around the world, that the United States is pretty much ignoring as much as it possibly can. China is going to be doing a lot this year. China is really going to continue its expansion. Jupiter is really favoring China, favoring Beijing, and they are thinking big. They're thinking global. They're thinking, expansion. And once again, through the Jupiter in Pisces. The Jupiter in Pisces means they're going to be expanding much more into the South China Sea. They've been doing that already, but they're going to feel very empowered about it, because the United States is going to say, well, maybe it's not really our problem. We have enough issues to deal with. And that's been the main hindrance to them to a certain extent. However, they will have to deal with the fact that in central China, they will be dealing with protests. They will be dealing with disruption. It may be issues related to earthquakes, but it very possibly will have a lot to do with social unrest. They're having issues now, of course, with their finances because of their lending policies that are just were out of control for so long. But there's going to be a lot of disruption, like I said, in central China. Jupiter is such a big player this year because it is so powerful, but at the same time, its polarity, Saturn, is also powerful. As a result, in these places where we see very strong polarity between, like in here we see between the Republicans and the Democrats, do not expect to see much progress in this year, because they are both strong. See, before this, last year, you had Jupiter and Saturn in the same sign. Basically, Saturn was keeping a thumb on Jupiter. But now Jupiter is unleashed. And it does actually relates a lot to one of the symbols of the I Ching, where basically, the strong is above and the dynamic is above and the responsive is below. Things actually come to a bit of a standstill because neither one is giving way. And that's the dynamic we have going on this year. So in terms of watching the big news, even globally, don't expect people to give up their positions very easily for the year of the tiger. Don't expect it. On the other hand, one thing you will see is that issues related to Jupiter, which have to do with legal issues, also issues related to travel, to things like even the wine business, are going to accelerate. Why? Jupiter is moving very fast. Jupiter goes through the entire sign of Pisces from December of 2021 to May of 2022, at which point it enters Aries. It spends a period of time in Aries, and then it backs into Pisces again. But that's a very fast Jupiter. So at the end of the year, it goes back into Aries. But when Jupiter moves this fast, if you're doing anything entrepreneurial, it's a fantastic year for that, because any kind of project will move forward really quickly, especially if it relates to Jupiter and Pisces. We happen to live in wine country, so we're real happy about that. India may be playing some fairly, be very involved in technology and issues related to microbiology. Really watch for that. Europe is going to have a relatively quiet year. I know right now we're seeing a lot of stuff going on about Ukraine. From what I'm seeing in the charts, it's really geopolitical. It's a lot of saber rattling. We're not seeing it as a big issue for stress or violence this year. Where we are seeing a lot of martial energy this year is in alignment with Iran. That whole line going north. That's where Mars is, Mars, Venus, and Vesta. One of the ways in which I think this is going to play out is that women's rights are going to show up very, very strongly. And the reason is when you look at the actual configuration, Mars is lower in the sky than Venus, and Vesta is in between. Vesta is the sign of the grandmother. And I think that women's rights are going to become a very big issue, and realize that when, the United States left Afghanistan, the country they left behind in terms of women power was very different from the country they originally invaded. And you have a lot more educated women, a lot more women with money and influence. And I think it's going to start changing it from that level. But once again, it's Mars and Capricorn. Mars and Capricorn is not a violent position. It's an industrious position. So we may see a lot of progress in that part of the world. So the one area in which I'm a little worried is in New Zealand. There could be a lot of earthquakes in that area this year. And also, like I said, central China, also up through Jakarta, Indonesia, a lot of disruption in that area this year, a lot of political disruption going on. But here in the United States, everyone's focused on home. Everyone's focused on here. Everyone's focused the world out there is the world out there. But it's a very, very interesting year. The year of the tigers are always very entertaining. They're exciting, they're high energy, they tend to be prosperous, but just really, pursue, the right strategy on the East Coast, focused on your home, focus on your communications, focus on the people close to you. On the West Coast, you focus on the home and then focus on that which you want to be creative about. I think you're going to see, and one other thing you are going to see a lot of this year is there's going to be a very strong drive towards commitments. I mean, we're already getting a huge number of weddings are taking place this year that have been put off, but I think in a lot of ways, people are going to want to formalize commitments in the course of the year. That's just something that's, people are starting to think about the future more carefully. So I hope that was illuminating. We work on these things over several months, and if you see all these charts over here, these are all the charts for the future years, because we look 5 and 6 years out to see how does this year fit into the timeline. And it fits in very nicely. It's really a set point for us, a chance to kind of get back on our feet and remember who we are. So please come see us at Planetary Calendar Astrology on YouTube. We have our forecast that we do every Friday. We have our educational portraits that we do every Tuesday. You can also come to planetarycalendar.com, where you can find, the planetary calendar and our various books. And until next time, be well and happy Chinese New Year.